just the rage and her wrath, because now you want justice. And if we're not careful, it will bite us in a way that it makes it hard to recover. It's like a snake bite, a poisonous snake.
Guys, oh my gosh, this is a moment. I have this fantastic inspirational woman who happens to be my friend, but besides that, that's my favorite title for her, but she got a whole lot of other important titles we're gonna go through today. Oh my gosh, I have the one, the only Latonya Stephens on the virtual couch today. I am so excited. This book, we're gonna talk about it, The Salt of My Tears. Okay, if that wasn't a mouthful, we're going to give you a whole lot more. So that was just a little bit of an appetizer. But let me introduce you to this amazing woman, okay? So Latonya Stephens is a marriage and family therapist. Okay, so she's going to help us declutter and work on our minds and our thoughts and things like that. So she's just not talking off the wind, okay? Like she knows for real, okay? And we are going to talk about, just bring some of her aspects of a therapist and connect it to some of her messaging in the book, The Salt of My Tears. You will see a picture of this book towards the end, so you can make sure you go tap in, purchase, support. She's also known to her listeners as Dr. Latonya, okay, a 103.3. As you listen to the morning grinds, okay, get your life together in the morning. Listen to the morning grinds on Hot Jamz 103.3. She is also Generations Prodigy and Zambia International Missions founder. Everything, CEO, she does everything, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit more about that and what she's doing in those towards the end. So you want to stick around, make sure you find out and make sure you can support her missions and her efforts, okay? She's trying to help our young get their lives together, okay? And I've been so blessed to be a part of that opportunity. And Zambia International Missions, she's taking it outside of the U.S. and touching lives outside of the U.S. This is not different from her, like this is her stomping ground. We will talk a little bit more about her missionary work. And that's how I got introduced to this amazing woman. And if that wasn't enough, okay? If that wasn't enough, she's also First Lady and Director of Worship for Trinity Temple, okay? And if that was enough, I love shout out to Trinity Temple. I hope y'all are watching. We're going to make sure you guys are able to tap into this video. And if that was enough, the reason why we're here today, we're going to talk about her new venture, Uncapped Inspirations, where she has now birthed. You guys know I love the pregnancy related topics. She has now literally birthed a new project that I love called The Salt of My Tears. Dr. Latonya Stephens, thank you so very much for hopping on to our virtual platform here. The work you've done with women in particular is exactly why I wanted you on this platform, because I think you have a lot to say and a lot to share. And I love that you're so transparent with your sharing. So thank you for joining. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. You know, I just love you. I just love you.
I'm so excited to talk about this. So I have had the pleasure to read through. You guys know I'm not a quick reader. I'm a little bit of a slow reader, but I took my time because I be pensive about stuff. And when y'all be dropping them gems, I got to go back there like, wait, hold up. So the fact that I sat down and read a whole book, I'm so proud of myself, y'all, because I usually only read a lot of like medical stuff because I have medical guilt. So I only read a lot of medical stuff. So this was a pleasure to step away from my usual reading and gather some of the gems that you have basically laid out there for us to all pick up and take with us. Okay. So I want you to give me a sense of what this journey was like for you. Now, what is the overarching theme for The Salt of My Tears? What led you to write this masterpiece?
Well, one of the things that I was grieving myself. And with this grieving process, it was one of those moments where you start crying, and after the tears, there's this residue left over and it tastes salty. So if you kind of taste your cheek, there's some saltiness to it. And so the salt for me were my lessons learned. And so that's why I titled it The Salt of My Tears, because that was the residue after experiencing the losses, after experiencing different events throughout COVID time frame. So this was the residue which spilled over into poetry. It was the shortest way to summarize how I was feeling, what I was experiencing, some of the lessons that I've learned through this two-year period. So that's the
Wow. And there are some layers to the topics that you discuss and the things that you discuss in the book. What led you to decide to even write the book? Like what made you decide to take your lessons and put it in such a form?
what catapulted was I had a dear friend who passed away, and I dedicated the book to her. Her name was Ruby, and she actually died last year. It wasn't due to COVID, but she was older. She was 77 years young. And when she passed, I had so many questions. And it was probably one of the most frustrating deaths I've experienced. And, firsthand was right there as she was dying. And family members were there, sweethearts. And, but for some reason, this one hit me so differently. I've lost a sister, I lost my best friend, I've lost my inner circle of friends, a great deal of them.
Wow.
And so grief seemed like I was constantly processing grief. This was a little different. And I didn't know the words. And I actually was on Clubhouse one day, and there was a writing class there with Monique Lisa. And she, just sitting in the room, and she had everybody go through different exercises. And one of them was to write down the first 5 words that come to mind. So I wrote them down. And she says, now create a sentence. So I created a sentence. And then she said, create another sentence. And so with the 3 sentences that I had, and she had everyone read theirs. After I read mine, we received feedback. And then she said, you have a book in you. She said, you need to.
Wow.
And there was another inspiration. A young man by the name of Tyler Gordon. And he's only 16 years old right now, but he was on a Nick Cannon show, and I watched the show, that interview that was conducted. And he was sharing with Nick Cannon that when he was 10 years old, and he was only probably about 14 when he did this show, 14 to 15. When he was 10 years old, he had a dream. And he said God told him in the dream to draw, to paint. He went to his mom in the middle of the night. His mom told him to go back to bed. And he had another dream. He said God told him this time that if he did not paint, he was going to take the gift away. So he went to his mom crying and said, I have to do this because God told me that he would take the gift away if I don't. So she gave him her paint brushes and canvas, and he did his first drawing in 17 minutes.
Wow.
After I was watching him, and it clicked like it was a brand new light bulb.
Wow.
To write. And I remember having a dream over 20 years ago, to everything that he gave me to write it down. And at the time, I was just thinking about my dreams and things like that. I didn't think about me being an author or a writer from that fashion. I always wrote poetry. But it finally hit differently. Like, oh my God, he did tell me everything that he gives me to write it down. And I just never thought it.
And you never really thought book at that point. You just thought that this was just, what did you think he meant by that, by the way?
Because I was a dreamer. I was a dreamer. And so I was just writing down dreams. I'm thinking everything he gave me in a dream, or from that perspective. I never thought of a writer as an author, because I had a professor who told me I was not a good writer and to not even think about pursuing it. So I've had negative feedback and very bad experiences when it came to writing. I didn't mind it, but after I did that dissertation, thank you, by the way, because you was one of my readers.
Oh, it was great. It was like that was a great experience.
But it helped me to let me know that if I can do a dissertation, I can do a book.
Listen, you are so right about that. You are so, you are so right about that.
Yeah. And I'm like, but that Tyler Gordon, I was like, I thank God for that little young man. That young man, Gift. I mean,
that was a word.
that was it right there. That
That
was
was
the
absolutely a word. And there is who are you writing to when you wrote The Salt of My Tears? Because as a Black woman, now granted, I feel like every Black woman was writing to a Black woman.
yeah. So the
But as a
first,
Black woman, I felt very relatable comments. And I don't know if just the Black woman experience. So I'm curious, who were you writing to?
at first, I was writing to the hurt part of myself, the wounded me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wanted to, it's like an ode to Miss Ruby. In fact, I had a great aunt named Ruby as well. So I had both of them in mind. So the Ruby that passed away last year and my great aunt who passed away when I was in I was about 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a caregiver for her as well, for both of them.
Wow.
And there are some portions throughout the book
Mm-hmm.
I'm writing to the young people, that chase after the trends of music and
Mm-hmm.
the dangers. I'm writing to the little girls that are still trapped inside of grown women that need healing. Um, Writing to those who question death and they have an ought with death in a
Mm-hmm.
way that is not understood. Those who are interested in committing suicide, that there is other options, there is hope, and they don't have to end their life because not realizing that next day can be better. And they
Yeah.
don't give themselves that opportunity. And then they leave behind individuals who are hurting and planting seeds in the lives of young people. They don't realize they're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
They're planting seeds that this is a way out, you know. So it becomes a cyclical effect in our society. And so we just need more hope, sustainable hope, not just one day in the camera and I'm excited and I'm like, and I'm laughing or making everybody else laugh, but I'm tore up on the inside because I have too many questions that
Mm-hmm.
I answered. So this was writing this, a lot of answers started coming to me to help me. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm writing to the one who's dying on the inside who needs some answers as well.
I feel like to touch on a topic that you just brought up in regards to suicide and how it impacts our community. Now, certainly we've been having lots of discussions on this with the unfortunate losses of people who are really shocking for us because they're not what people envision as to be the face of suicide. There's an excerpt in the book that really stood out to me. And it said, too much pain brings a sour taste, bitterness, isolation, and questions. Too much sadness breeds anxiety, fear, and rough lessons. And when I read that, I really did think about the fact that I feel like, especially when these incidents of suicide happens, or not just suicide, but just all that our community go through, that there is sometimes the pain can be so overwhelming, and that it does breed a level of bitterness, especially when there's injustice related to that pain.
Yes.
It does breed a level of isolation because it feels, in some sense, as they said, hopelessness is the most common, or the most common feeling related to suicide is the sense of hopelessness. So that isolation is very real, feeling that no one really understands our journey as Black people in this country. How do you process when things like that happen?
One of the things that the late, his name was Walter Christie, and he shared one thing. Well, it was a couple of things. One was don't leave here, don't leave this world without being empty. And so it's a thing that we have so much on the inside of us. And if it's not identified, we'll go with all of those things. One of the second things he shared was you have to continue to serve. If you're not serving, it's like there is nothing that's feeding you. Because sometimes we look at servitude in various ways, but to where it's like a giving of ourselves in a way to where we're connecting with people. And without those emotional connections, and it's not just in a way to where, oh, I love you, or, oh, you're so cool, but there has to be an emotional connection to where it's feeding. There's a life-giving situation, just like when the bees pollinate, they're carrying from one flower to the next, or tree, or whatever plant that's available. Is feeding and giving life. So there has to be some serious connections, because we're not getting it through social media platforms. We're giving more time to social media platform, but we're not receiving that human natural connection that we need, that continue to give us life back. And that's going to become an increasing problem, because it's on the rise.
Yeah, yeah. What do you see in terms of, so for people who don't quite understand, describe what Generation Prodigy is, and what's your observation there with our young people?
So Generation Prodigy is a nonprofit organization that was based off of realizing now my life story. I was an inner city kid who just needed someone to come along to just provide guidance. My parents was there in the home, but of course we spend majority of our time in the school system. And the way we're fed sometimes is there are a lot of other challenges that we face, and sometimes we don't want to talk to our parents. And so I target young people, especially those that are in their city, their urban communities, and even some rural communities, all youth right now, because they are missing information that's going to help them in the future. So there are so many African proverbs that deal with, if our home are not intact, our nation won't be intact. And so my goal is to target them from an academic perspective too, because so they can want to go to school and they can understand some of their school lessons, because a lot of them they're losing interest in school. They don't want to go to school, or they're going to school vaping, or they're already smoked out before you get a contact high just going through the front door. So I go to the school. I'm going to the school.
You have to tell me twice with the state I live in. Listen,
it's unreal. I'm like, are you saying? I'm like, how you start your day this way? So they're starting at a disadvantage, and so they're losing days of school. The absenteeism rate is higher, and so what is happening? Some of the parents are like, I don't want my child going to these schools. So we're trying to at least bring some light and some hope in that way, and then have an experiential learning experiences that's going to help them academically to really highlight. So for example, our first trip and tour, we did a civil rights and Black history tour. When we took the children there, we did a sample group. They were like, stuff is real. I was like, yes. And so it came alive for them. So when they went back to study history at school, it was a lot easier, because they had first-hand experience, and some of them were able to educate their teachers on the truth.
That is fantastic. On the truth.
On the truth.
Okay. Unwatered down, unedited truth.
Yes. Because I took them to where slave trades took place. I took them to some of the first African Americans that were millionaires out of slavery. And allowed them to experience what it was like at Tuskegee, and also to firsthand hear the story of George Washington Carver. He was just not the peanut man. So good. Color, pigment from the ground, he was into that. Tires, rubber from the tires with Ford. He was a very integral part of that.
Yes.
And a lot of people taken some of his patents. So he was very instrumental. So they learned so much information. They were like, we didn't know this. I was like, well, now you know.
I love it. I love it. How would they, because a lot of their disinterest, lack of motivation, comes from the pain of their experiences, pain of what they're witnessing vicariously through the media. How are the young people processing pain, and how are you guiding them through that understanding?
So I have what I call Teen Talk, and Teen Talk is a process group for the teenagers, for middle school and high schoolers. So we meet like once a month, and in the school system, I meet with them every week. So they have a mentoring program here in Kansas City. And so last few years, I did 2 schools on a Monday. And then this year I'm doing 1 high school. And so I have a group there. And then in some of the church settings, and I'm open to any church. And if they want to learn how to work their program, I'm available. We have curriculum for it. So we meet with the students, and no parents are allowed. No other adults. Yeah, they can't. But the parents are able to sign off on their children because we let them know ahead of time. Everything is absolutely confidential. But if it's a matter of life and death, of course, we're going to report and let you know. We'll give you updates. We'll summarize as a whole of some of the things that's happening with the youth. So the Teen Talk, they're able to release all of their frustrations, hurt, pain, and some of the things they've shared has been heart-wrenching. And but they've been able to just kind of pick up the pieces and keep moving. And that's part of the goal, is to have them encouraged to keep moving, to graduate school, survive this life. So we also have online Teen Talk. We have to get back to it. So we hiatus for a few months to regroup after COVID. And so we did have an online platform as well, to where we had keep the topics more light. We don't as much when it comes to emotions and feelings, but we give them that platform so they can enhance their communication skills and use a positive way to utilize social media. That one once a month, and we'll launch back out in January. They wanted to start this month. I said, I think we better wait till January. As we regroup.
Yes, people, that is that balance in life. Okay. I mean, it's so great that you're doing that kind of work, because for speaking for another Black girl that grew up in the inner city, like, we just didn't have those outlets, and we have, really impactful experiences. Like, there are things growing up in inner city has stayed with me as an adult, and I'm still processing certain experiences now as an adult that I never had the opportunity to process as a teen or even a preteen, but definitely exposed to a lot of violence in our neighborhoods. And I think the same for our adults. I don't think our adults necessarily had the opportunity to process things like that. We've witnessed massacres on our own block, of a whole family that was very known to us, and very dear to the entire community. And so when you talked about in your book, The Sting of Death, that was very real for me, from those childhood experiences, our teenage experiences, to now, like you said, the loss of a loved one, who was pretty much like a sister, one of my closest and dearest friends at the top of this year. So death does have a sting to it. So help us understand, what is that sting of death? How are we processing death as especially as Black people in this United States of America? And I'm going to touch on a few other topics when it comes to America, because you touched on a whole lot of them, and I don't want us to go into that. Okay. So let's start off with before we talk about America, because there's a whole lot to say about that. In the resurrection of Black, listen, that whole chapter, that whole right there, we're about to touch on that. So y'all stick with us. But before that, help us to understand, what is this thing of death?
So right now in our nation is hatred. Hatred is brutal, and even bitterness. Bitterness, it's as rotten as the bones, as one of the proverbs read. And hatred breeds it. It breeds murder. It is a terrible, terrible, terrible sting. So when it's one thing for a person to die of natural causes, but it feels different when someone is hunted down and murdered. And especially in the African American communities, and our Africans who came over across the waters. And this brings so much emotion, because to be hunted down by dogs, to be chased because someone does not like a person because of the way they look, that hatred, it feels so different. So to have experienced death from a person who has died of natural cause, I felt it. And then to feel the pain of a death for someone because they were hated, because they were brutally murdered, it just feels so different. That hatred, it plants a seed of bitterness. It plants just the rage and the wrath, because now you want justice. And if we're not careful, it will bite us in a way that it makes it hard to recover. It's like a snake bite,
Mm-hmm.
a poisonous snake, because it spreads. And so hatred will beget hatred. There's nothing that comes out of it, nothing good. And so it stings communities. We're still dealing with the trauma of the hatred that has hunted down our people, And so people wonder why are y'all so emotional?
That part.
Ask the person,
right?
it doesn't matter what color they are. It doesn't matter what background. Let one of their loved ones get hunted down and murdered, and then ask that question.
Right.
And
see hatred is an emotion, by the way.
Yes. It is. It is. And so, and it stings. And when a sting happens, if you ever been stung by a bee or a wasp, it lingers for a while.
Yes, it does. It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Takes to take the sting out.
There's a bitterness to it.
Yes. And the only thing that can take that sting out is love.
Yeah. Yeah. You're so right. And I'm trying to remember the passage. There's a passage where you brought up strange fruit, and I'm trying to remember exactly where that passage was. But I'm going to get back to that because my mind it's not remembering right now. But on to your point, it's interesting how you have to justify your response to living in a society where that you're hated, and where that hatred has been passed down from generation to generation. But the people who do the hatred, they're never having to explain, why do you hate so much? So it's just interesting that we've always, in some ways, always seemed to have to justify everything about who we are, how we respond, how we act. And a lot of our experiences is laced in that history, is laced in the fact that that you kind of live this life of the hunted, of the prey. So that's why when I read the section that talked about the chapter that talks about the resurrection of Black, it just seems so empowering to me. And there is a lot that's said there. I'm not gonna disclose too much because I want folks to go get the book and read it themselves. But there's just even the introduction where you said Black by definition is the darkest color of night, a disappearing adjective often associated with fright. Let me give this all my might, providing an understanding of what this means. What does it mean to be Black? Like, what does it mean to be a Black woman for you?
I'm torn because we're defined by a Crayola box. And when I step outside of America, I'm not looked at as Black. I'm looked at as American. They listen to me, they hear me talk, and they say you're American. They don't say you're a Black woman. So for me, it's kind of degrading because understanding where this stems from, where there are Europeans who go to an area and it is defined as Negroid, which means Black because of the color. And so I struggle sometimes because I'm like, I am not a part of Crayola. They don't pay me to display their rainbow. So I am of African descent. That is historical. That brings connection for ancestry. It brings a sense of identity. And that was the one thing that was stripped and we were robbed of. So the resurrection of Black, for me, is bringing new definition. And because when somebody said Black, that means they're stripping you down of your identity. That's how I looked at it. So Black and proud, I get it. I get the entire thing, but where it stemmed from, it was from a negative connotation that I refused to embrace from that perspective. And so the resurrection of Black, I'm destroying the narrative of what it was because first of all, I'm not ignorant. I'm not Black. There is no one that dark that we can, I mean, you see dark shades of brown. We all shades of, um, but to bring it was negative. So you had Black face, you had Black this, Black that, Black this, Black that. But there's nothing that identified with something positive or something that brought connection, that brought true identity. So I wanted to put another spin on it and say the resurrection of Black, because, okay, let's destroy the old narrative and let's bring a positive spin on this, because we are a people. First of all, we're comprised of all the minerals that exist in the ground. We have copper on the inside of us. There's inside of us. We are a people that is wealthy just by nature of who we are. So the melanin in our skin is very rich because of the type of dust that we were comprised of that was miraculously formed in a healthy bump.
Okay. I love it. I love what you just said. For more than one reasons. No, it's so true. And so, I love the fact that you have spent so much time doing missionary work around the world, technically, but you spend extensive time in Africa, in the various countries of Africa. You're now founder of Zambia International Ministries. Why is it important to you to focus on Africa specifically with your missionary work? I know a lot of people will say, well, obviously, because that's the motherland and we're connected, but not everyone necessarily feels or has the same purpose behind doing work with African countries. You have been in this field for decades, for people who are not aware. Like, this is not a new thing. This is not a COVID thing. This is not a pre-COVID thing. This is a decade's worth of work in Africa. Why was that so important to you as a purpose for your life?
I did not understand me. And I think God had a wonderful sense of humor and introduced me. I was introduced to a young lady. She was from Nigeria. She was my first introduction to Africa, because I had no clue, wasn't even thinking about Africa until I went to college. And my friend Amaitari Atete was as beautiful as the sun. She was she brought everybody together. She was so she had a very charismatic personality, and she was from Nigeria, and she passed away, actually. But she was my first introduction. We were roommates, and then I had another roommate who was Cameroonian, so we all lived in the same house, and I learned the culture, and being with them, it felt so natural. The food was so good, and I had an opportunity to go to Nigeria, so that was my first trip to Africa. I went to Nigeria.
Oh, it's Nigeria. Oh, that I did not know.
Lagos, to be exact.
Lagos. You listen, you went to the epicenter, is what you should have said. You went to the epicenter. Okay. And this was Lagos, what year?
Oh, this had to be the year 2000, maybe. Yep, I think the year 2000.
Yes. So, pre the Lagos we see right now, where folks are turning up. I just want people to put things into context. Like pre the Lagos, that you guys are seeing now on social media, where it's clearly turned up. The nightlife is popping, very metropolis. But Lagos in 2000, early 2000s, just like the US in early 2000s, was a very different scenario, but still very much misunderstood. There's so much about Africa that's was marketed in a particular light, and did not, and intentionally, I would say, did not show a lot of the wealth of who we are and the culture of who we are. Yes. So what is your experience in African countries then versus now, and what is the evolution that you're seeing over the years that you've been to Africa?
In some areas, not much, to be honest with you. Especially for Nigeria, they are very advanced when it comes to media. because they have Nollywood, and
Yes.
um, they have the industries there are very strong when it comes to engineering. They have brilliant minds.
One of the things that the section that I really loved and enjoyed reading, because I was like, it's not just me, was the section where you wrote Dear God. Because I listen, I literally was like, one, I love the fact because I'm always trying to navigate my relationship with God when it comes to pain and suffering, right? And when it comes to experiences that are really hard and most challenging to process, because sometimes you're in the motion of the motion of it. And I was trying to remind myself God can handle your emotions. Like he like you're not gonna shake him. He's good. He's all right. But it's always sometimes really hard to navigate all the things, especially with Christianity, trying to navigate those things that you know are sort of the goals of a mature Christian with the reality of experiencing this thing called life. And so I love the fact that you, in the very first answer, you talked about, and I'm going to read, I'm not going to give them too much, but I'm give them a little bit. And actually, when you started out with, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but when you start off with Dear God, I wrestle, I immediately thought of the wrestling between God and Jacob. Did I say that right? Yes. God and Jacob. And so I immediately went to that because that for me was so symbolic. And so that was the first imagery I had in mind. But then you went on to say, I wrestle with the trauma in the present from my past, albeit it was yesterday. I wrestle not with unforgiveness, but to forget what just took place. And I so related to that, right? So you can have an experience and you're good with forgiving. But then sometimes, even though you forgive, like we still have this thing called a memory. And sometimes that memory can replay experiences, right? And so I thought that conversation and the whole conversation that you then went into was so transparent. So how do you process emotions in the context of your relationship with God? And then if you can touch on that last sentence where it talked about, it's not unforget, like these are experiences in the past. So these are things I've been through. This is not anything new, but I'm still working on X, Y, and Z. And that X, Y, and Z can differ for so many of us. So how is that process for you with having these conversations with God? And then how do you process when people, especially when people expect that you're done, like you're not over that?
Right.
No, I'm not. And it's not unforgiveness. It's just, I still remember. So how do we process our lessons from those experiences into context with our unforgiveness or forgiveness, I should say?
Yeah, this is where the 70 times 7 comes into
Listen,
play.
and that's the other thing I thought about. I was like, this lesson. He's like, it is on, but I'm gonna let you explain it. I'm not gonna confuse the people.
I mean, it's real because it's like it's hard to erase, as I put it in, the stains from your soul. So when you spill something on white, especially let it be a piece of fruit that's red, or anything, if you don't have the right things to take the stain away, it's going to stain forever. There are just some things it takes a lot of processing to be able to come to a place of peace, because sometimes we may never forget. We just may never forget. There's some things I remember since I was a child. Mm-hmm. Forgiveness, yes, but I have not forgotten, especially if there are things that are constantly reinforcing those memories. Mm-hmm. So it's easy for peace to come when there's no reinforcement. But when there's reinforcement that's being attached to these very pains or stains, it makes it more difficult. And so this is where wisdom come in and understanding, okay, so hurt people hurt others. We hear that a lot. Mm-hmm. But it's in a way to where a lot of times people don't realize how wounded they are. It's once we realize how wounded we are and how deep things have hurt us, we're more careful with our interactions with other people. So I had to pay attention to the wounds that were constantly being uh, brought or instilled, and making sure there's not self-inflicting from a place where I understand that I'm already dealing with this, not to allow myself to enter back into these situations. So I'm not being avoidant, but I'm also being cautious and trying to use wisdom. So if I know someone is belligerent, I know I'm not going to entertain a conversation with them because it's not going to go anywhere. And so I'm not going to allow that level of reinforcement to bring deeper injury for myself. So yes, I've forgiven that person, but I know that they're not even healed yet. So I'm not going to put myself in the same position, because now their evil communication and the way they are, I don't want it to impact me to where I negatively impact someone else.
Right.
So wrestling with these constant reinforcements, and that's pretty much where it stems from, is the reinforcements, because you still deal with this stuff. So it's easy to step away from a situation where you no longer have to deal with it again. But when you have to deal with it or live with it every day, how do you not lose your cool? How much more can a person take?
Right. So I think one of the things we struggle with is what really is forgiveness, because some people will say, if you haven't forgotten it, and I literally just heard this, I'm not going to call out who the preacher was, but I literally just heard this. If you haven't forgotten, then it's unforgiveness. And so then help us understand what exactly is forgiveness, right? What does that look like?
So forgiveness, and this is my experience, my readings, all of that. Forgiveness is releasing them from what they've done. I'm not going to hold them accountable. I mean, I'm just releasing them. I'm not going to remind them of what they did. I'm not going to hold them to it. It is what it is. I'm releasing them from it. And I don't feel that, I call it the butterfly effect when I see them. Because you see a person that have wronged you. I had a person that had wronged me, and every time I saw them, I just wanted to slap them in the face.
It was a response, right?
It was every time I saw them, I just wanted that urge to want to slap them, but I didn't. I knew I wasn't there yet. I just
right.
But the last time I saw them and I didn't want to slap them, yeah, I knew that I had totally forgiven, because I didn't have that urge to want to hurt them in any kind of way.
That visceral response was gone.
It was gone. And that was one of the signs for me, for that particular person. Then there are instances where I can genuinely serve a person without hesitation. So that keeps the heart pure. You know, so without hesitation, without feeling like, oh, I don't want to do that.
That's real.
All of that. Yeah, those are the manifestations that you have forgiven. Memory, we are programmed to remember. We have the area that we either going to fight or flee. Right. In our bodies, these are things we don't control. The things that are in our flesh, we can manage them where they're not out of control. But the body has memory. Sometimes we don't even realize that we have remembered something until the body may react when our mind don't even recall.
Right.
Because it senses danger, it'll react. We're like, why am I jumping?
Right.
So I tell people, like, we're human. And everything about us is going to, somewhere there's going to be a memory, whether it's in the present time or if it's in the subconscious or the unconscious layers of our minds.
Yeah, my bowels have memory like an elephant. Like, if I encounter somebody, this may be TMI for a lot of folks, but this is a real transparent conversation. So literally, if I encounter someone that causes me stress or has caused me stress in the past, like, my bowels talk about memory. Like, my mind may not be thinking about it, but my bowels will be like, girl, this is her. Like, yo, we still don't like her. Yeah. But no, that's very real. And on that topic of forgiveness, like you talked about, one of the things that the Black community has had to do over and over in America is keep forgiving for all the experiences that we've gone through. So every time we have this major event, and it's always some major event that's always mind-blowing, life-shattering, events that we're witnessing, of all different races. I'm not saying that the Black community is the only community that's witnessing and having these experiences, but we're oftentimes the target of these experiences. So we have had to go through the process of forgiving America and start it over again, and then something happens and we still have to forgive America again and start over again. So there was one section where you talked about the verdict, and I don't know if you were particularly talking about one particular verdict, but I feel like there are so many verdicts that I can put in that scenario. So were you talking about one particular case or event, or were you kind of symbolically talking about all of these types of experiences that we have had to endure?
So it started off as one particular case, and I watched the verdict, and it stirred something in me mighty troubling. Because I'm like, had this been an African American individual, he would have been sentenced to life in prison for taking a life. And this person got away because they felt that it was because they took justice into their own hands, that this was, a worthy cause. The frustration from that, I don't want anybody to be hurt and have to suffer unnecessarily, but so many have been falsely accused and lost decades of their life.
Literal, yes.
And it has endured trauma as a result.
Yes.
So it was really interesting. And then for those who intentionally murdered, this is the hatred, this is that sting that we deal with, to be scot-free. And then I had to remember, so this is where the forgiveness come in. So I still have to even practice forgiveness even in moments like that. It's not a direct impact, but I'm holding something against the person I don't even know. But it's like the byproduct.
But they're symbolic, right? They're symbolic of the system. Yeah.
Yes. But I had to practice forgiveness, and I had to remember, we reap what we sow.
Yeah. And you did say that. And I love that you ended that way.
And so the thing is, because people have to understand their hope does come in many forms. It don't just come in one way. We can't look for, they got to get theirs. They're going to get theirs. I cannot wish evil upon somebody.
Right.
But I am reminded that vengeance belongs to someone greater than me, myself.
Right.
And they do repay. And so I don't have to worry about that level of vengeance at all. Yeah. Because now I'm going to put myself in a place where I can cause greater harm for myself that I don't need. I need to live long, and I don't want to look like I'm 100 years old.
Yeah, and it creates a cycle, right? So if you sow that type of bitterness and emotions and anger, you will reap it in your life. And we're so much more worth it than that. And the greater power has a much better plan of vengeance. Like, he's way better at vengeance than we can even consider, because he knows people like deep. Okay. So like when you witness his vengeance, you be like,
yeah.
Like,
and it may not look like we want it, but it comes in a powerful way. So people remember, if they live by the gun, they forget. So, and this is why wars are never ending as well. So when we look at a person who have died, in the moment, they're not thinking about the ones that's left behind. So when we don't consider those that are left behind, and we kill, even if it's just to try to protect our place, when we kill someone, we don't know what goes through the other person's mind that has dealt with the murder. If they don't know forgiveness, if they don't know love, the next generation can come after you.
Yep.
So that's why a lot of police, they're panicking, because they shooting a lot of people.
Yeah.
And their loved ones are coming after them. They don't care.
Yeah.
So people got to remember that. They need to think 3 times before they kill someone. Even if it's trying to protect themselves. You don't know what's going to be like for the next generation.
Not at all. That seed does get planted, whether you want to or not, it gets planted.
It does.
That's very real. Certainly glad that you talked about the verdict and explaining the concept behind that. And you're right, America has witnessed a lot of these verdicts, right? And I wonder, like, how do we get here? You have this section that talked about greed in the book. Is greed the greatest sin of America? If you were to say, what is America's greatest sin, and how does greed play into that?
So the love of money is one of the roots of one of the greatest evils. And slavery, period, is as a result of greed, because that's free labor. And most of our banks, and some of the nations, if you look at some of the wealthiest nations today, they were heavily involved with the slave trade. And unfortunately,
and still, hence the human trafficking, and still
yes,
human trafficking is a multi-billion-dollar industry.
yes. So because it's like once you get a taste of power, because money is attached to the power that a power person can have, because some people feel they can pay their way out of anything. And so the more power they have, so you're dealing with the love of money and then the love of power. And with the both of them working together, it creates monsters. Because once they get fed, that ego is fed in that area, they want more. That's why gambling is such an growing industry. I mean, I remember in Detroit, we didn't have casinos. Then we ended up with a casino. And how many people have lost jobs as a result? Lost their minds as a result, lost so much money. Greed, and I hate to say it, even in Africa, corruption, greed, power. Our nation, especially more recently, have dealt with a lot of greed and power. People will do anything but sell their souls for money.
That part.
And power.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And the young people don't. The cryptocurrency. I have not seen so many people.
There is so much I can say about that. And it's interesting that it is regulated. It is now the primary target of scammers, whereas the primary target of scammers was like ransom and things like that. Like now, the primary target of scammers is using cryptocurrency, right? Like you can make this amount in this amount of time. You can make that amount in this amount of time. This is what you need to do. Let me get a copy of your wallet. Let me see what your wallet looks like. Like that is the motivation now, because they realize that people who are going into that area and the whole NFTs is because they want more money, right? That's really, they want more money quicker. And instead of going through the standard industries, the stock market, which, you know, there's disparities and biases there too, in terms of education, knowledge, and that's what keeps us, that's a whole other conversation, y'all. We'll talk about that another time. to make the story short, that's now they're seeing people are looking for that quick fix, just like they are with gambling. And so cryptocurrency has become this quick fix, and it has attracted a lot of people because everyone is thirsting for, no one is living lives of contentment. Everyone's thirsting for that quick fix, that quick money, because money equates power. And people think that that ultimately leads to freedom, right?
Yeah. They're thinking, but it's not regulated. It's not regulated at all. So it's out there. Anybody can do it. Anybody, and that's why there's so many scammers out there, because it's not regulated.
Yep.
So it's a huge gamble.
Yes.
And people are going, or we're going to find out why a lot of these suicides are taking place as well. They're just not going to talk about it, because if an industry is thriving and people are benefiting and profiting, they're not going to put it out there like that, because people are going to be afraid, you know.
And a lot of people lost a lot of money because the industry fell so many points. So you're right, but it's done in secret, right? So that secret is what gives its power, because it's able to do what it does And a lot of people don't really share that they're into it because there's still a little bit of shame because a lot, it's not widely accepted. And so some people feel like it's something that they have to kind of hold in secret. So they do this in secret, they lose this amount of money, and no one really understands or know that they lost this incredible amount of money. We need to do a segment just on that. But it's literally gambling on steroids is what it is.
It is. And I used to work for a in the stock industry. So it's all a gamble, but when it's regulated, at least somebody's going to be held accountable.
Right.
For their actions. And when there's no accountability, you can be loaned to the wolves.
Yes. And that's exactly what's going on. And so what is your hope? What is your hope first for I would say first for America? Like, what is your overall hope for America going through this process of grieving and taking into this larger scope of what we experience in this US of A? Like, what is your hope for the relational issues in America? And then ultimately, what is your hope for us as Black people?
I'm going to work it in the reverse.
Okay.
Because the Black folks have built this nation, literally. And so if we can come to a place where we're truly resurrected in our heart, mind, and soul, and come together, America can be a beast in a good way, because we built it with our hands, but we suffered in our emotions.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So if we can recover in our emotions and still keep that same level of diligence and wit, tenacity, and bring those ingenious ideas together and work together, oh my God, there is nothing that we as a people cannot conquer.
That's so true.
There's nothing that we will not be able to do. It'll be definitely like a superpower. And the nation, because Black people have a tendency to be very forgiving sometimes. It's two extremes, either very forgiving, they coming after you.
It's so true.
Just saying, they're coming after you and they won't forget. And so if we can heal, it's going to impact America in a huge way, because it's going to turn things around. Because once they come together, no matter who hates us, they're going to come together and conquer. We get the crab mentality is what tears us down, and we take sides and do all kinds of crazy stuff. My hope for America is that we go back to a place. Let me not say go back, because it still brought some craziness, but we come to a place of, to keep it real, just to know God, and on our dollar bills saying, God we trust. We're one nation who is not as war torn for a reason. I truly believe that if we believe in someone who protects us, guides us, strengthens us, keeps us, and who is able to give guidance and that wisdom that we need to circumvent, to bypass, and to strengthen, we will continue to be a strong force in the world. If we don't, America, if we take on hatred, we need to take on allowing artificial intelligence to run life for us, we're going to lose human touch. The heart of many will wax cold, because there won't be a human connection. And when there's lack of human connection and voids becomes greater. So as artificial intelligence rise, we're losing human and social impact and connection. Even with phone calls, I call a company, hello, welcome to whatever the company it is. We're talking to Siri. We're talking to Alexa. So we're talking to all of these other devices that have no human, it doesn't feed us.
No.
Nature feeds nature.
Yeah.
Artificial intelligence cannot feed us as human beings. So as we continue to engage it, we continue to lose that human touch. Hearts wax colder and colder. Our homes are being constantly divided and destroyed. And as a result of that, the nation will fall right along with it.
That's so true. That is so very true. And so we've all been through a lot. We've talked about our grief. You've had your grieving experiences. I have my own. We're not the only ones. We talked about in another episode just the amount of Americans who have lost someone specifically related to COVID, not included all the other deaths that are still happening in large amounts, right? And so needless to say, one of the common things that we've all experienced has been this grieving or loss experience that I think does connect us. And so you talked about what I love is the picture at the back of the book just says it all. But we're going to try to put that picture into words. So you talk about the new baptism. For the individual, for that person who had similar experiences as you have, who've had great loss over, you said over, I think you mentioned over decades, if I remember, like 2 decades, almost 2 decades worth of losses, of great losses. How do you then get to that place of the new baptism? And what does that new baptism mean to the individual who is still grieving and is trying to get to that place?
It's allowing ourselves to cry. So that was something I had to embrace, because also in our community, sometimes to be able to cry is looked upon in a negative way. For men, they're told that they're weak. For women, some of them, it's the same thing. To cry is like, I can't cry in front of people, or I can't do this and I can't do that. We have so many I can't. And but we all have tear ducts. That's the crazy part, right? So we all have tear ducts. And so it's cleansing. And so I had to let myself go and be free and allow the tears to flow and learn the lesson from every tear. And so that's why each poem is labeled a tear. And speaking of just a sidebar, the picture, there was a young girl. She was only like 9 at the time, I think. And she was drawing. And I saw the picture and I was like, oh, this is nice. She did not like the picture at all. She thought it was just one of the worst pictures she's ever drawn. And I said, can I use it? And she looked, and because I'm about empowering young people. So that's the picture on every tear, or every poem was from this young girl. She's now in middle school. And
that's beautiful.
So, yeah.
That's really beautiful.
Being baptized and having those tears on there, allowing ourselves to just cry it out sometimes, not to a place where it never ends, but to allow it to cleanse our hearts, because we feel better once we release all that pressure and just have a good cry. So when in a place where it's foreign territory, I've decided to embrace it and allow myself to cry and allow myself to have this new baptism. And so I can have that get up swing and
I love that section too. Like I literally was like shimmying. Yeah. That's what it's about. That's really, really what it's about. It's about going through these real life experiences, which is no surprise to anyone. It's not surprising to our higher power, to God. And so it's navigating all of these aspects of these experiences and coming out on the other side. And knowing that it's okay. It's okay to have these moments that are considered to be weakness, but they're really strength. It takes a lot to be able to release. And there are physiological benefits to crying. There's a reason why there are physiological benefits to crying. There's a reason why your blood pressure drops. There's a reason why your pulse drops. There's a reason why there's this release and your stress hormones are re-regulated, because it's intended to be a reset for the body and the mind. And so I love that was, really the summation of this incredible work and this incredible journey that you took us on in the Salt of My Tears. And so I'm excited to what's coming next, because this work, if this is the start, man, where we going? So share with us what's next.
I have another poem where I'm in the process of completing a premarital book. And
Oh,
I've been years to do it. And I was like, I have not done it. So I'm finally breaking down to do the premarital book. So it'll be a little different because it'll have stories in it and scenarios. So
I
people,
know this is gonna be good already. And listen, I'm gonna tell y'all this is gonna be good already. So I'm gonna just have to update everybody when it drops because I don't know.
it's gonna be fun. I want to make it fun, but I'm keeping it very real. So
That's
I'm
what we
taking,
need.
oh my God. Yes. I mean, I'm just, yeah, because I'm taking what I do with a person in session, I'm putting the same scenarios in the book so they can get a feel like as if they're right there with me. Because some people may not want to come in, or they may not be in the same state or whatever, but they may want to have that similar experience. So I have them asking a ton of questions to their partner in it, and they're very real questions. Some of the questions that sometimes they don't think to ask, especially nowadays, they're just different scenarios and alternatives. So it's only fair for someone to know the truth on the front side because it makes it difficult to process through, and it makes it difficult to overcome a situation if it's not dealt with on the front side. Because why, when you're in the courtship stage, love is truly blind. It really, really, really is.
My friends laugh at me because they say I say it's a form of psychosis because you do things that you won't normally do. And maybe that explains why my marital status is what it is right now. But that's what but
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
like you're literally in a different mindset. Like you say
yeah,
stuff, you do stuff that you won't ordinarily do. It's just that's euphoria is a whole other level.
it's chemical. And
It
our brain
is.
is chemical. So our chemicals and hormones are all over the place. And until they stabilize, and usually we don't see things until after you marry and things settle because that's when they stabilize and go back to normal state. So that
Like,
place of is real. Yeah.
that same behavior that I liked back then, I thought was cute, now annoys me.
Because of the tolerance level is different. Because when your chemicals are all over the place, your happy juices are firing like crazy. So you see the things, but you have a higher tolerance. Therefore, the love that you see, that's it, love covers, it literally does. So you're in that state, and so you see it, but you can tolerate it differently. So when your tolerance level goes down, those chemicals settle, your tolerance level changes. And now you're like, okay, every day.
You're like, I used to love that he calls me every day. Now I'm like, why are you calling me every day?
Yeah. And it's like, oh my God, can kind of control it. Like, oh my God, okay, this is
Listen, I told y'all this is gonna be good. All right, so we got one book coming. What else is coming?
yes. And then I have a poetry book that I'm working on now. And this one is going to deal with, so the next one, I don't want to give the title away quite yet, but the next poetry book is going to deal with, how they tell you to make your bed and lie in it.
Yes.
So I'm doing the opposite, telling don't lay in that bed. Mm-mm. So I'm giving the reasons why in the poetry book, and it came to me one day because so people may not know that. So when people have bed bugs, right? So when there are bed bugs, and people may not realize they're there because they make up their bed, and then they uncover it and they laying in it, and they got more issues because they don't get a chance to get out of the bed. So they're constantly staying in that bed. So we don't give our beds the opportunity to breathe, and anything that they get in, if they don't get out, it's trapped, and you laying with that thing. I'm like, okay,
You don't get bitten and eat up. Literally sucks the blood out of you. Literally. Okay.
that part.
Blood being a representation of listen, y'all better heed. Heed.
Yes, I'm not. Don't lay in that. Don't lay in that.
Don't do it. Don't do it. You heard it here first. Don't lay in that bed. We are so excited for all these great works that you have coming up. So how can our listeners, our viewers reach out to you? How can they follow you, see all this amazing work that you're doing?
So I'm on Instagram. My IG name is Dr. Latonya. That's Dr._Latonya. And I'm on Facebook as well. And you can follow me with Uncapped Inspiration, or just put in the hashtag Uncapped Inspiration, and you will see all the platforms where I exist. My website is www.uncappedinspiration.com. That's www.uncappedinspiration.com. So I have put, all the latest and the greatest on there, and share different, information and even quotes. I have to do better with my quotes.
But if they want to find out your quotes, they can follow you on 103.3. Okay, Hot Jams. Get those the morning grinds. If you want to, if you want that 60-second inspiration in your life. See, look at that. Look how I did that. Unkept inspiration on a daily basis.
Yes, I'm usually at the end of the segment of the show, so they can Google it, so they save them, So on Wednesday, just tap in and listen to it, and towards the end, they will hear Dr. Latonya with uncappedinspiration.com on the morning grind, Hot 103 Jams.
I love it. I am here for all of this. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And listen, if you have not gotten your life yet through this whole discussion, listen, get your life with Uncapped Inspirations with Dr. Latonya Stephens. This has been an amazing conversation, as I knew it would be, because I know how she is. Okay. Listen, you should have gotten your entire life with this whole conversation. We thank you so much, Dr. Stephens, for being on this platform with us. I am Dr. T, the hand behind the handle of Healthy Bump .club, and you can find us on Instagram under that name, or you can find us right here on YouTube with all our amazing conversations, all these powerful women at Healthy Bump Club. We thank you guys for following, for listening. We thank you for supporting us through our apparel called The Village, because it really takes a village. We're here to create a community, to support one another so that we can live our best lives, and that's what this is about. We're looking forward to an amazing 2023. We thank you guys for supporting us through 2022, 2021. We have greater, better things coming ahead. And we love you guys for commenting. As always, like, share, comment. That's how it gets this information. Important gems like this need to be out front in the virtual world. Okay, that's what it's about. So make sure that
her, like, for real.
Yes.
Let me tell you, she helped me when I was pregnant, like, for real. She really helped me. I was having these back pains. Like, we ain't trying to have no back pains like that.
That's what we're here to do. That's what it's about, supporting one another. Like,
yes.
Listen, that's what it's about. And that's what this community is about. So thank you so much, Latonya. Oh, well, Dr. Stephens, I'm sorry, I'm still on camera. Dr. Stephens.
Thank you, Dr. T.
And we see you guys when? Next episode. Yay!